Okay, so right here is a copy of my midterm assessment that my supervisor has emailed to my guide teacher, and he CC'd me on it. It's not a complete midterm because my guide teacher did not put any input into this, but I thought that I would use this kind of as my basis to share not only my opinion, but what I see as kind of the reflection of how I've been doing. Um, so first off, I like the not observed. There's a couple things. If we first check out second column right here, organize student data, use it to plan future lessons, and use it to differentiate. Um, right now, the most data I've been able to collect on the students have been from quizzes and tests. I haven't really done a lot of grading on their homework. My guide teacher does more of that. And so right now, it's been difficult to try to plan lessons based off of what the kids are doing, especially because of the fact that I want to go along with what my guide teacher is doing. And so I really find it difficult to find balance there because as I say that, I feel like I'm using that as an excuse, but it's also part of my reality. Um, right here, where it says collaborates well with teachers and administrators, the only teacher I really am able to collaborate with at the moment is my guide teacher, and I try to be on board with what he's doing and try not to deviate too much from his structure and from what the kids are used to. I have on a couple occasions done that, and I feel like it's gone okay, so that's been encouraging. Communicates effective with parents and guardians. In Lafferty's class, I got the ability to read an article about the positive effects of a phone call home. And that article kind of addressed the idea that, hey, I don't have to call home just when there's trouble. I can also call home if a kid's doing really well. And so I've been kind of keeping that in the back of my head, trying to decide if I want to do that. I don't know if my guide teacher would let me have students' phone numbers. I also don't. I also worry that I might come off as like playing favorites. So I've been a little hesitant to do that by myself. Um, I don't really teach with the guide teacher too much. Usually he just kind of lets me go. He's jumped in a couple times on lessons, but that was more kind of in the beginning when he would do that. So those are kind of things that um, are not observed because I haven't really done much of them. And so I'm still kind of looking for opportunities, but I don't know if I'll find many this semester. And so that's just something I want to keep in the back of my head for next semester. I'm really pleased that I don't have anything that needs special attention um, because that tells me that I don't have any red alerts or red flags. Um, and that's good because I don't feel like I'm doing anything at that low of a level. I don't feel like I'm amazing at a lot of things. I actually feel like this overall rubric or actually grading system is a little better than what I would grade myself as. Um, I feel like yes, I definitely could work on giving peer feedback or having the students give each other feedback. Um, I wonder if I was able to build on the student-to-student interactions and the high degree of student participations. I wonder if that would help lift that up as well. I'm not sure, but that's something I want to keep in mind with myself. Um, I'm surprised that this was put at developing competence and not observed, with the just because of the fact that I don't really have any EL students right now. Um, I have a couple that I feel are they're not labeled EL students, but they're weak on their academic language, academic use of the English language. They're fine with just conversational English. So it was interesting to see that being labeled there. See positive feedback during instruction. That's actually something that my supervisor has told me both times during both live observations that he really likes my mannerism. I just really like trying to keep the class as positive as I can. I really hate being the disciplinarian, but I've definitely done that a couple times, and that's been empowering for me. So I really like that. Um, Here it says creating, maintaining effective environments for student learnings. Right here, behavior expectations and transitions. Yes, I've had to talk with the kids a number of times. This is something we constantly come back to, where during transitions, I seem to lose the kids a lot, and I've let them know that. And so I try to give them, when I'm telling them that we're done with a task, I try to tell them that, hey, we're done with this, but this is what we're going to be moving on to. and I've been trying to give them a time limit, saying, hey, I'll give you guys 30 seconds or a minute to go ahead and put that away and get the next thing out. I think that's been improving, but I definitely want to make sure that I keep on them about that. Um, right here, I feel like once it's interesting when with the transitions, I'm constantly trying to get students to be quiet. Um, as we're starting new activities, and so it's fun when students, shush each other. I try not to verbally encourage that, but it always kind of puts a smile on my face when I see that. Um, the teacher with itness, I really take pride in that. I wasn't sure how I was doing until I got this feedback, but just to see that, okay, I am having, or at least I'm showing that I have an awareness of the classroom that I really want to have, really puts a smile on my face. That really encourages me. Um, Here, some of these ideas, I really like that I'm able to bring my tutoring experience and bring, and this is, I feel like, where that most connects, because when I tutor, that's this right here builds on students' responses. That's my entire tutoring model. Is I tell students all the time, it's okay if you don't know something, but I need you to tell me that because it helps me to know what to say next. And so I've brought that phrase in. We don't really use technology too much, so I'm interested about getting this mark for that, because other than an overhead, and we don't really use a whole lot of technology in the classroom. In my methods class, we talk about using Desmos on the Chromebooks. I don't get an opportunity to try any of those activities because we don't have Chromebooks. But okay. Um, it tends to academic language. I try to constantly bring the students back to that. Uh, I've had them use repetition, where I say, okay, after they describe something to me, going back to the building on student responses, I say, oh, well, describe what in your own words, and they describe it to me, and then I say, okay, that's called this, and I'll use the word, and I'll have them repeat it back to me, and I feel like I'm hoping that builds their use of the language. Um, Thoughtful sequencing and pacing. I feel like I've started using a timer for the pacing. That's something that I worried about even before I jumped into the program as to how well I would do keeping an eye on the clock. Um, One of the things that my guide teachers helped me with is know when the bell rings. And when he first brought that up to me, I said, "Well, I know when the bell rings. If the period ends at this time." And he just kind of laughed at me and he was like, "Well, no, you need to know because the clock is off." And I didn't notice that until he drew my attention to that. And now I know when the bell rings precisely compared to the clock. So that's really cool. Checks for understanding. I believe I do that, but I definitely want to get better to that, because I feel like the better I get at that, the better that will cause students to self-reflect. I feel like some of these are linked here. And I feel like the constructive feedback, my hope is that will take care of itself as I'm doing a little bit more of the checking for understanding and asking the students to see if they understand. Um, Response to feedback and self-evaluates. I'm guessing that this was given to me based on the conversations I've had with my supervisor. I really appreciate everything that he has to say to me. He has yet to give me any advice that's been confusing, and so I give that credit to him. Everything he's told me is stuff where, oh, I didn't think about it in the moment, but the minute he says it, it makes perfect sense, and I'm able to say, well, yeah, of course, if I did this activity again, I definitely would want to implement those ideas. So I really appreciate the advice that my guide teacher or that my supervisor gives me, and the way that it allows me to kind of go ahead and say, oh, well, if I repeat that type of an activity again, I'll be able to go ahead and do a lot better. Down here is kind of really encouraging thing. We lost the ability to talk for just a second. I'm glad it happened now and not in the classroom. So my strengths, and my supervisor has told me this: a calm, positive demeanor, and my teacher with itness. I've kind of already referred to that a little bit. A strong voice. I think I mentioned at one point that my boss at Grossmont College has told me that my teaching voice is great. I need to work on my tutoring voice. I have no intention of doing that because I want my teaching voice to remain nice and strong. good movement around the room. I try to make sure that even if my body is staying still, that my that my head is constantly roving, so that way I'm never losing sight of everybody in the room. I believe that once I do that, kids that are going to pick up on that and they're going to know when they can act out and be a little crazy. I don't want to lose the classroom at any point during the lesson, and so I feel like that helps that. Let's see. Oh, yeah, and I didn't even read this last sentence, the carefully positioning myself. Um, yeah, the redirecting students. I always like asking students questions when they ask me questions that are irrelevant. If they ask me things like, oh, when is class going to end? Or, hey, are we going to be working on this assignment today? They usually ask me that during like warm-ups. And so I say, why isn't your warm-up out? And it's funny because a lot of times the other students act like I just totally burned them. And I'm thinking to myself, no, I just asked a question. I didn't even insult them. But it usually gets the students back on task. So, uh, and they don't feel insulted, so I really appreciate that. Because otherwise, I would really want to change my demeanor if the student that I asked the question of felt insulted. Um, right here, I would like him to focus on building lessons that enable student collaboration. I'm just now starting to do that. So hopefully during my third observation, my supervisor is able to see some growth there and able to give me even more feedback to get better. It's very tempting to just blame my guide teacher and say all he does is direct instruction, so that's all I do. But I really want to start taking ownership of the class that I teach. And so hopefully I continue progressing in the direction I have been.